All right, we have a motion and a second to begin the meeting, so we will begin and see, we'll go into item 2, which are the zoning items, discussion 2A, discussion of proposed short-term rental ordinances. I'll entertain a motion to start that discussion, or summary and then discussion.
Sorry. As you all know, this came about last October, staff wanting to add in language in the code about clearly saying that short-term rentals are not allowed. And then that kind of sparked the interest of entertaining an ordinance. This was also brought up to City Council, and they were open to the idea of an ordinance. So now we're here, ready to discuss it. The staff report kind of goes over history of that and just what a short-term rental is and what other cities are doing. I think the best place to start is to start with the challenges, the concerns, the issues that we may have with short-term rentals, and try to work through solutions through that and seeing how it can be enforced. So we all remember, we're hopefully going to have a new code enforcement officer in the next few months. And so it'd be great to say, okay, well, I'm concerned about this for short-term rentals. How can we address that, and what's a way that we can track it? So in the staff report, I do have, let's see, a table that has like the policy objectives and approaches and what not to do, kind of. So if you would like, we can just start there or wherever you guys want to start, but I'll turn it over to you guys.
All right, should we open up for discussion among commissioners? Or are you saying start with just summary?
To turn it over for discussion.
Okay.
Okay. Here's where I'm at, I guess, on the short-term rental ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm stuck between two positions because I actually asked family, asked a couple of neighbors, what do you think? And it was kind of the same result that we got on the survey. About half the people say yes and half the people say no. And usually what you get is, well, I wouldn't necessarily want one next to me, but I'm okay with them, which is not a reason not to have them. It's not a viable reason anyway. I think where I land, because I use Airbnbs all the time when we travel, and haven't had a problem. I have seen some weird regulations, particularly in California, but so I guess where I'm at is, yeah, we should craft an ordinance. We should allow short-term rentals, and specifically what I'm interested in, the two biggest things I hear is parking and not allowing parties. And I don't know exactly. I think we can regulate parking fairly easily. Parties, I think we can limit people staying at the short-term rental to be only those people, I don't know what you would say, registered to be there, or that have actually rented the place, as opposed to inviting people over. But pretty hard to regulate it. I do like Ogden's ordinance, if I'm reading it right, where the owner of the short-term rental has to give the neighbors information, contact information, so that if there's a problem, I'm assuming the neighbors can call the owner. that was good. I don't know if I know enough to say what zone should we allow it in, should we limit it to one per block? Probably ought to be limited in some way, but I don't have strong feelings that way. Should require a license, it should be permitted, so people know what the rules are. So shortly, that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments?
If I remember right, the whole reason that we kicked all this back up was because the police department was looking for more teeth to say that they weren't allowed, but now we've kind of switched and we're like, okay, we're gonna, and I still think that should be the thing. Make sure that there's teeth. So if there's will they, and I've read Ogden cities and a couple of the others where they do have a permit,
Mhm.
something that can be taken away if they abuse what they're doing. I
Right.
believe that's probably important. And I also like telling the neighbors, I thought about the one every block thing too, or 2 every 3 blocks or whatever you're gonna do. I don't know how to, that would just confuse me, and it probably takes away from somebody that's also wanting to do it.
It could, potentially. And sometimes it's hard to know every single person that's running a short-term rental. 'Cause the hope would be that everybody would sign up for the license. And this may be something we discuss later on, is as far as the license or the process of getting the license, we don't want it to be too rigorous that, halfway through it, they're like, no, I'll just run it and they don't have to know. So it's also putting that into play. And then even looking at if it's just tracking through Excel or having some sort of software for a code enforcement officer or code compliance official, I think, so we decided on, for them to track. But yeah, that's all the things to talk about. As far as the local contact, what I've noticed more so for West Havens is they do have to have a 24/7 phone number. And I'm not necessarily suggesting we do this, but they do test it out and see if they do answer. I know the state code says that the owner has to be within X amount of miles. I don't know that on top of my head, or certain time away from their house. So if anything happens, they can come and respond to that. Granted, it won't be maybe immediate, but it would be in a good amount of time that they can address it. As far as like parties, yeah, I don't think there's a sure way to ever really mitigate that. But yeah, having a limit on the number of people is a good start. And then if anything gets out of control, they're not exempt from the rest of our city ordinances. So if it gets too loud after a certain time, they could still call, code enforcement during the day and then the police after that.
I think that with the advent of Airbnbs and short-term rentals, that a lot of people have moved from hotels to these facilities. I flew for an airline for 35 years all over the world. Delta put us up in really nice hotels, and I can tell you, there were many instances where it was very disturbing, very hard to get sleep. Parties when they're not supposed to have them in a room, parties in the hallway, all kinds of problems. And so I'm against it for that reason. I don't want a house next to me to be a substitute hotel for some people. If you've ever been in a hotel, a nice hotel with a large number of Russian guests, you'll know what I meant. Nice European hotels actually put a limit on the number of Russian guests that they would accept at any time because it was driving away their good customers. They wouldn't stay there anymore.
Yeah,
And that's just one small problem, but I've just
right.
dealt with that. I dealt with that for over 35 years, and I don't want it next door to me. It's the way I feel about it.
Gotcha. I will say maybe it's different having the room next to you, maybe different than the house next to you, right? There's a little bit of separation there, but I do understand your point.
There were hotels that took up an entire block. I use one, for example, in Manchester, and if there happened to be a soccer game going on, I would request a room that was on the inside the block, and just looking at the other side of the hotel. It's a little breezeway, because the noise was so bad until 4 in the morning, you couldn't get any sleep, the noise outside. It doesn't have to be just the room next to you, it's the hallway, it's what's going on outside in the courtyard or the pool area or whatever. And I see similar problems with, and the vast majority of people are not that way, but it doesn't take that many to really cause a problem.
I just have a question. I noticed some of these say it must be owner occupied. Do you think that means the owner has to live in the house? Does
Yeah.
the owner have to be there while it's being?
So, not necessarily. And that's mainly so people don't just buy out these homes, right? We have affordable housing, right? We want to have that. We do have that issue. That's so they don't buy out that home and just have it be a short-term rental indefinitely. Most of these, or the ordinances that I saw, they have to live there for at least half the year. So however they interpret that. So no, they don't necessarily have to be there. But that is something we can discuss, have that be a requirement. I'm not sure on certain websites like Airbnb, and I'll have to look into that. But I seem to recall that they don't like it when the owner of the house is there when their guests are there. But I can double check that for sure.
If I can add to that, I saw a commercial, I think it was for VRBO, that the commercial actually said that, the owner will not be there. And that might be one of the terms that they have for people to have a VRBO rental, is that the owner can't be there, so.
I just didn't know what that meant exactly. If I were renting a place, I would not want the owner there. I think that's weird, but.
I know a little bit about that. There's some of the sites, I mean, Airbnb started more as like a couch surfing thing where you would just rent out a room. And there are some cities that just outright ban Airbnbs that are when you're not there. But they do allow like the rental of like a room, but not the whole house. And so sometimes those owner occupied ordinances are more, you're okay to rent out, or like an ADU, like if you have an ADU that you live in most of the house, but you want to Airbnb an ADU or a room, a lot of those ordinances are addressing that.
So yeah, I mean, maybe that's the next point to discuss. Currently, our ADU ordinance does not allow short-term rentals at all. That's, I think, the only place where we address short-term rentals. Would be open to allowing them in ADUs, whether attached or detached.
My initial gut reaction to that is I think we put the whole ADU ordinance into effect to try and solve some of the housing problem. And then if we allow people to use them as short-term rentals, that's not solving the problem. It's compounding the problem. I don't know. Maybe they can use them as short-term rentals for a specific number of time during the year or something.
So maybe just to be clear, but what you're saying, maybe have a certain number of nights for ADUs specifically? Maybe
Yes.
like a total of, I don't know, 20. I just picked a random number, I don't know.
Isn't it pretty typical to limit the number of nights for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually, it comes out to be half the year.
Thanks.
But
How would you have a property that, say you're choosing between conventional rental and short-term rental? I mean, if you were going to use it for short-term rentals, then it would just sit vacant, I guess, some of these things other times, because you can't then go and just do like a 6-month rental. You know, if you're looking more for a long-term rental, I guess I don't understand how that would work.
So you're, okay. Just to, can you clarify that a little bit more?
Yeah, what I'm just thinking, like the example of an ADU, you can only use your ADU for 6 months out of the year as a short-term rental.
Okay.
The other 6 months of the year, what are you going to do with it?
Well, anything over 30 days wouldn't be considered a short-term rental. So, I mean, that's up to them to figure out.
I just don't see someone being like, oh, I want to rent something for 2 months, you know, or like,
Sure.
it's just going to make it,
Harder for them to rent out that space that they created to just rent out overall. Yeah, but that's up to the homeowner to figure out and to weigh their options, because there are people that maybe have to come here for a business trip that may be more than 30 days. And at that point, it wouldn't be a short-term rental anymore. So if they want to help people out like that, or if they have family that's staying with them. But yeah, I see your point of, well, if we only limit them to use their ADU for half the year. And another thing to consider is that's also hard to track. How are we going to know?
yeah, I think I'm more thinking that you create limits, but maybe
Mhm.
if you have a short-term rental, you don't necessarily limit the days for that short-term rental,
Mhm.
but instead you create other ways to limit the amount you have in your city, because you don't, I mean, we do have like ski slopes, you know, we have certain things that would draw people to want to come and have short-term rentals here, and you don't want to overrun you want that sense of community, so I get all that. So I think there's other ways to create limits, so you still have some ADUs that are used for long-term rentals. But that's just some of my thoughts.
May I speak to that?
Yeah.
The 6 months doesn't have to happen altogether. So let's say you only rent your short-term rental on the weekend. And so that's 2 times 52, so 104 days out of the year you're renting it. That's still under the 6 months, because
That's
it's
a good
less
point.
than 300, half of 365. So the 6 months doesn't take place all at once. So you're consistently renting out your short-term rental, but it's not filled every single day.
Yeah, you're probably, in a short-term rental, your occupancy is probably not going to be
100%,
anyway,
yeah.
so, yeah, that's a good point.
Well, we understand what the benefit to the city or to the community is to do that. It seems like it punishes the homeowner but doesn't bring a whole lot of value to us by doing that, but I may be missing something.
I don't want to speak for Commissioner, is it Diedler? Am I saying that? DDA, sorry. DDA, but I think just that concern of just having like this constant churn of, like, say you do have one next to you, at least you're guaranteed half of the time to not have someone there and, you know, causing a nuisance or a concern. I think that'd be the primary benefit.
Another concern, it requires, North Ogden requires one parking space per vendor. When I go to a VRBO, usually I got my truck in a 24-foot trailer, and I always look on Google Earth before I rent a place to make sure I got plenty of places to park it. But if you had, 2 people come for a 2-bedroom to stay in my basement, for instance, and they park those on the street, I could provide 2 parking spaces. I've got the room for that, but not for those trucks, so they're gonna be sitting in my street all the time. I look for rentals where I don't do that to somebody, but, not everybody would. Come rolling in there, or people would stare in the bedroom with 2 cars, and then all of a sudden the whole street's jammed with cars all the time. Or ski season, for instance.
Can I also point out that when we say you need to provide parking spaces, they need to be off the street parking spaces. You
Yeah, but it-
cannot count the street as
Right.
parking.
Right, I think his point is that when they're considering parking spaces, they're not really considering something so long or wide for a truck and the trailer.
And then we're gonna have to enforce people to park in the parking space and not on the street. And if they have friends come
Right.
over, their friends are gonna be parked on the street. You know, somebody that's renting a place 2 blocks
Sure.
away or 5 miles away. You know, people like to get together when they come out to ski or, you know, they don't all choose the same accommodations.
Yeah, at that case, I mean, they're not the ones staying there, so they don't have to, comply with that, and it's okay for them to park on the street.
But it just creates another problem with the short-term rentals that
Sure, it's more
the
traffic.
neighborhood has to deal with.
Sorry, go
Unless we put it in I once stayed in one in Hurricane, and I think the city of Hurricane made an ordinance that you could not park on the street. Like that was very explicit in our rental agreement that I could not park on the street, and that was kind of like I had to read that like 10 times, and even when we went to the house, it's like, do not park on the street, and it was just in this normal residential neighborhood. So I think there's ways to, like if we wanted to put that in our ordinance, for example, there's no on-street parking for these,
Right.
like to Commissioner Bradley's point, that was one of the main concerns he heard was parking.
Mhm.
So that would be something that I think we could add into our ordinances. For an Airbnb, you have to provide, there's no on-street parking.
Right. I mean, that should kind of be for everybody, even residents, but not everyone follows our parking ordinance. But yeah, we could add some wording in there.
Commissioner Caldwell, got that right? Are you Caldwell? We haven't heard from you.
Overall, I think I'm in favor of it. Didn't start out that way, but as I've read more about different regulations, things like that, feeling more comfortable with it. I think it's a good opportunity for people in our community to supplement some income. Wouldn't want to take that away from them, but I also really don't want to create external competition for our housing stock. So I haven't really had much to say because I think I agree with where this conversation is going. Overall, just I think it's something that's worthwhile, but something we need to do in a careful manner so that we're preserving the community.
Thank you.
So if you would like, we can go through what specific things you guys want to see in the ordinance. And you have a few different options, right? But next meeting, we can have another maybe discussion item and like with the actual ordinance and then a public hearing, or we can have them together. We can have the public hearing next time and the actual ordinance in front of you.
I don't know how these other commissioners feel, but I think we would need maybe one more meeting to craft, or maybe meetings to kind of iron out the details of what we think would be a good way forward for our city. Because I hear the concerns of Commissioner DDA. Did I do that right that time? Okay. And I know there's, like Commissioner Bradley said, there's 50% of our city residents will feel similar, and the other 50% want them. So just trying to strike that balance where you get that win-win. I think it's going to take a little more time to craft that win-win thing where like 90% of people feel comfortable with it. So
I think when all this started, I think I was in the same boat. I didn't really look forward to it. I thought, I think I was clear. I didn't want to see Airbnbs here. But I think I changed my mind. I talked to my neighbors too. And I think, yeah, as long as we put together something that's going to make neighbors feel comfortable
Sure. Sure.
So that when the neighbors need to call the police can go and actually figure something
something
out.
out.
And there might be a step after the next day that gets taken with the owner.
Sure.
And I haven't been on Airbnb looking in South Ogden recently, but I do have a hunch that there are.
No, there are.
They're
There
here. So, I mean, this would kind of give us the opportunity to enforce some things and then give, people, the neighbors, a voice that they don't necessarily have right now.
Right, and that was the whole reason of considering this ordinance, right? We can say no, but that doesn't necessarily stop people from having them. So, like, okay, we'll give you what you want, but there's gonna be certain requirements that you're gonna have to comply with. What do you guys feel about having like a 3 strikes rule or 5 strike rule or something like that? And that way we can identify like the problem homes, I guess. And I mean, like, okay, we gave you a chance and now you're done. How do you feel about that?
In favor.
Yeah.
You're-
I even think maybe 3 strikes might be generous. I don't know if there's more of a, like, you're on probation,
Okay,
get well, or you lose kind of a thing.
okay,
Because I don't think, say a complaint comes in, I don't think that a neighbor that made the complaint's gonna feel comfortable when the officer says, all right, I just warned them, and this is their 2nd strike. If they do it
Gotcha.
again, then we're gonna do something.
gotcha. So do you want like, okay, you have a warning and then the next time you're done?
I think that's closer, yeah.
I have a question. If we limit it to 1 a block, for instance, now you're telling one person on the block, well, you can rent out a portion of your home to make extra income. Sorry, nobody else can.
Right,
We're letting him do it, but we're limited to 1 block. Would that stand a legal test? If somebody else wanted to take it to court and say, hey, listen, you're letting this guy do it, but you're not letting me do it, how do you determine that? First come,
That's a
first
good
served.
question.
And now I
Yeah.
can't make any extra money with my home.
sure. That's a problem a lot of cities face. I think Ogden, I don't remember if North Ogden had one too, but I know Ogden for sure has a certain limit per block. Yeah, that gets a little dicey also because, yeah, if we, let's say 5 or whatever, 5 in a neighborhood, but then there's 3 illegal ones, like, I don't think that's gonna solve that problem necessarily. But,
I can give you a little bit of background why rule was created. Places like Moab, where it's a high destination point, almost every house was turning into a short-term rental and undermining the neighborhoods. It was creating problems for first responders, anything you can imagine, it was happening there. And maybe for those high destination places, that type of a restriction would make sense. I don't think maybe it would make sense for South Ogden unless, to your point, it's kind of like saying you can, but you can't. What's our basis behind that?
yeah, I don't necessarily see South Ogden as a tourist attraction, and maybe some of it is we can adopt an ordinance one way and then see how it goes for a year or 2, and then if it becomes a problem, we can limit it. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was, oh, sorry. I know we recently went through like in the South Ogden LDS stake, we went through just a reorganization. So we went through a lot of plot maps and saw that there were just different like called out neighborhoods in South Ogden. And so I think there's other like geographical ways to, like, I don't think South Ogden would ever get to a place where we saturate, but I'm also would not want that to happen to South Ogden, say like skiing really took off or something. So I am in strong favor of some kind of a limit, even if we don't necessarily reach it, but I don't know if we do it by like find some kind of a neighborhood or zone or whatnot, but I do think that there should be some kind of a cap that just prevents us from some like outside like a bunch of outside states just sending a whole bunch of money in here, driving up our, you know, like, I think there needs to be some cap just to make sure that we don't have outside money coming in buying up all of our homes. that
Sure.
Make the problem bad.
And going off of what you said, do we think only certain zones should be able to allow short-term rentals, or should that be an option for every zone? And then cap it a different way? So like, let's start with like an R18, R110, R16, where it's all just detached single-family dwellings. How do we feel about short-term rentals there?
Smaller lots would probably create a bigger problem with parking. You know, we are only 25 minutes from Snow Basin, and there's really not much on the other side of Weaver Pass to stay. You know, there's not it's really a, ski magazine called it one time a ski resort without a village. You know, it really is, they have to stay someplace, and it's becoming more and more popular, more and more crowded every year, not to mention Powder Mountain. And there's Wolf now, they keep changing that. But there are reasons for people to be looking for accommodations close to Snow Basin, and there's not much on the other side, so South Ogden is right there. Less than 25 minutes away.
Yeah, I guess I'd be interested to see what you were thinking with the different zones. And I think we ought to explore different ideas there, maybe by neighborhood, by zones, or maybe just the city as a whole, like, we look at our, you know, how many, you know, say it, you know, we want to offer 200 per, you know, we only want 200 in our city, and we don't care where they are, but we're just going to cap it at 200. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know,
Sure,
but I'd be
50%.
interested what other cities do, but I do think that there should be some sort of a limit, and I don't know how you give, like, owner occupied,
Yeah.
like, how do you write an ordinance that prevents, like, outside investors to come in and do stuff that,
Yeah, I mean, so far, it's been owner occupied. And for them to prove that that's their main home. 'Cause I know some people have, you know, a separate one that they go to. And sometimes that's showing their deed, showing their driver's license, getting something notarized. I don't think anyone has really solved that problem. But yeah, it's just been owner occupied. So I don't know, we can look at a number overall for the whole city. I do like what you said, that these bigger lots, they would probably provide parking, whereas the smaller ones would have a hard time. So maybe we look at only, like, what would that look like if we only allowed it in the R1s and the R2 maybe? Maybe not in the city center core. Or would we want it in a city center core? Because that's where people would go to when they're visiting our city. I don't know.
There probably should be some kind of stipulation that there's no parking on the lawn as well.
Oh, for sure.
I've done that in most of the places, it just says, you know, park on the grass.
No.
Someone wants to live next to a house that the whole yard is full of cars.
Yeah, and that is part of our parking ordinance. You can't park on the front lawn. They're not exempt from that, so, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be some sort of sentence for parking saying, hey, don't
Yeah,
park on the grass.
I think if you write the ordinance to say you gotta have one parking spot per bedroom, or for every two people, or however you do it, then it's up to the owner to comply with that, just like our parking ordinance now.
Yeah,
It's just, you'll see people that want to rent an Airbnb, but they only want an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment, instead of a whole house, or, you know.
Right,
and,
yeah.
I also saw, so I'm on that HOA in Idaho. For some reason, we're also tackling the short-term rental issue there, and I'm the one assigned to figure it all out. And so I've been pouring through a lot of Idaho code as well. And, you know, they're worried about this, outside investors. Another thing that I saw some of those codes up in Idaho did is they actually capped it to 9 people. A lot of Idaho cities have done, like, capped the number of people that can stay at 9, so just thought I'd throw that
Not
out there.
like 9 people in a specific residence?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen that for other ordinances as well. I think the most that I've seen was 10. But it doesn't have to be that. But
That
it
was to
depends on the,
prevent parties, I think, was one of
Right.
the,
Mhm.
yeah, and I, like, that was one of, trying to find it, it was on the table that I provided in the staff report too. Yeah, having just a number of people that can stay there. It gets a little dicey when it's a family, right? Because you don't know how big a family's gonna be.
true.
And then what is a family, right? There's a whole definition there. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, I can definitely include a number. We can start with 9 and go from there, or 10 or 5.
We also might want to consider that in different zones. 9 people in one of the units across the street is pretty different than 9 people
Right.
in,
Yeah.
a single-family home.
Maybe what I can do for next time, I'll include every zone, and kind of just put a cap on each one, and then we can have that discussion on whether we're okay with that, and then if we don't want them to be in certain zones, we can start eliminating from there. But I'll include every zone in the cap.
Can the cap be based on the bedroom count?
Yes.
Because it's big enough house, 6 bedrooms, and you assume 2 people per bedroom. and
Yeah.
It would make perfect sense for that to be 12 people versus 9, versus a 1-bedroom. If you still allow 9 people there in a 1-bedroom, it's a party. Right, so,
Yeah, and I've also seen that.
different kind of party
Yeah.
maybe, but it's a party.
And I'm thinking a lot of times we'll go get an Airbnb with, like, my sister's sister, and we'll all go stay in the same
Same.
house, and that
Okay.
we,
It's a party.
I mean, not really we're not having like a party, we're just sleeping. But,
I owned some students.
Yeah.
That's-
In Alabama, and what they would have houses that could be rented to students. There was a real severe limit on people, non-related living in a house. So it's like you couldn't have more than 3 non-related people living in a house.
Yeah.
You get a family of 10, that's fine, because they're all related. So the house that I owned was actually in a subdivision that was specifically zoned for student housing. And so you could, that rule didn't apply in that particular development. But that might be something that could be done when it comes to limits.
Have we sufficiently discussed this one, and do you have kind of a good enough notes to draft up some ideas for?
Yep, I'll do some more research. So then the plan for the next meeting in February would be to, sorry, to have a draft of an ordinance that we can discuss, and then we'll go from there.
Can I add a couple of things?
Yeah.
I'm just reading from your suggestions here, but I do like the idea of a requirement to post a notice in the property about sound, like quiet time has to be after. I've been in Airbnbs where they have that, where it's like quiet time is 10 PM to 8 AM or something like that. And I've actually appreciated that, because then I can tell my kids to be quiet. But-
Yeah,
that's a
we
good
can
point.
require them to have like a sort of packet
Mhm.
at home
And
where they have a copy of our ordinances.
place where they can reach the owner, place,
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, contact
numbers, that
information.
kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then, yeah, just like one of you mentioned before, being able to give their contact information to their neighbors.
I think we wanted that too.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention or ask about this, but when we talked about this before, I think Lisa might have mentioned this, that the municipalities, when you do have an ordinance, there might be a way to collect a tax
Mhm.
from the municipality. Have we looked into that more or know more about that?
I believe it was like a 1% tax for this that we can collect.
Yeah, that's what it is. I did look into it. and we can start collecting that.
Mhm.
Great. Is that something we have to add to the ordinance, or is that just automatic?
We have to pass an ordinance
Yeah.
that says that we're going to start collecting it, and then we can start collecting.
Yeah, but I don't think it has to be part of this ordinance.
Okay.
It's a city council thing.
All right, any more go-backs?
Not for me.
All right, I don't know, do we have to make a motion to move to the next thing, or just move to it?
No, yeah. It's just
All right, do you want to give us a summary of the next, yeah, where did it
like
go?
zoning item,
Yeah.
or accessory buildings discussion. So this one, part of this is I want to grab different sections of code, and just bring them up to you guys, just to pick your brain. This one, though, came from, a recent occurrence with a resident where, they wanted to have their accessory building be, I don't think it was 100% metal, but definitely more than 50, which goes against our ordinance and your staff report. I copied that section of our city code where it talks about having the exterior finished walls have a limit of 50% painted metal. And so I just wanted to have you guys discuss on just your feelings on having a certain percentage of a material. I don't 100% know, and maybe Lisa can jump in as to where the 50% came from. I'm assuming it has to do with not wanting like an old rusted metal building, like for aesthetics, which I do understand. But then I guess what's the difference? 50% versus like 60 or 75% of the building being metal. So yeah, I just wanted to get your insight on that.
Is the person trying to put in like a pole barn or something, like a pole barn shop? Or-
Yeah, it was all painted metal. You wouldn't, it was hard to tell from the picture that it was metal. It's all metal. Yeah, we were looking at it like, no, that cannot be.
Do you have that on your computer that you could show?
I don't think so. But yeah, we were looking at this picture and we couldn't tell. And so there's instances like that where, I mean, for sure, if you were standing from the street, you wouldn't know. Or even if you were a neighbor of this person, you wouldn't know.
It looked like board and batten, like
Yeah.
the hardy board. You wouldn't, yeah, you couldn't tell it was metal.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's metal. Board and batten is what they called it. Like, well,
Oh,
interesting.
just looking at this code, it might be, we also might be trying to prevent shipping in cargo containers, is
Right,
that?
yeah. So yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts on things like this.
So you're asking the question, why is it 50%? Does it still need to be 50% if the materials, you can't even tell they're metal?
Yeah, or do we need to word it differently, right? What is it that we want to pinpoint that we don't want, and maybe just reword it in our code?
I guess let's open it up to discussion.
I guess my question would be, do we already have an ordinance that talks about anything on your property that's unsightly?
We have a nuisance ordinance, but yeah.
This is a quote from our police officer. He would always say, how did he put it? Now I can't remember. I can fix bad, but I can't fix ugly. So, in other words, junk and weeds and stuff, he can take care of that, but one person's ugly is another person's beautiful, and
Could we,
I have a friend who's in the process of building one now out in the country. But, this is an image of what, see that siding's all metal. There's, the roof's metal, the sides are metal, it's black.
And it looks really nice.
Just because it's
Right.
metal doesn't mean that the house look decent, you know.
Mhm.
Right.
Materials, quality materials come in different form, it's quality that you're looking for.
Yeah, I
I
think,
think that, oh,
go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm trying to form something in my head about quality instead of material. Like, if it's of good quality, I can't take it farther than that, though. As opposed to, I mean, you can have it whatever color you want, but as long as it's good quality,
And that's
that's just not
another-
enough.
Another thing to touch on, have it any color you want. So right now it has to be cohesive with the main dwelling. But if my house is, I don't know, black and white, but I want a pink A-frame accessory structure, that wouldn't be allowed.
Unless you painted your house pink.
I know, right? I'll just say that again. Right. But not, I'm sure your neighbors wouldn't agree to that.
There's a house out in the city. It's blue. And a lot of people complain about it, but it's like one of those things, it's a light, it's not a house blue. You have to see it. If you guys have seen it, you look at it and go, it doesn't look house blue. But there's just nothing anybody can do, it's.
Yeah.
A lot of homeowners associations have covenants that govern building materials and what it's gonna be. I don't know if the city could do something like that, if they could do it in covenants and enforce it.
I think I learned from our one training a while ago that that's really hard
Yeah.
to do, and it infringes on people's freedom of speech and freedom of expression rights. That one gentleman that came was saying that those kind of things are more for
Yeah.
HOAs and not for cities, I think is what I took away from that
Yeah.
training.
The only way that city can say like architectural style or anything like that would be if there's some sort of like master development agreement. And even that, you know, you can't have that with every single person. That's more for like a subdivision coming in. So, yeah, we're not allowed to impose on that.
So I'm trying to think of where I would be bothered by a metal building. I would be bothered if it were just a shipping container, but I think you can say that in the, in the ordinance, and I'm talking in a residential area. You know, you see a lot of metal sheds, metal garages, not so much in South Ogden on smaller lots.
There's a lot of pole barns out there, right,
Yeah,
that are wrapped in metal, but not in
Yeah.
South Ogden.
Yeah,
I
and
actually like the provision that says it has to go with the house, or however you've put that.
That's very subjective.
Yeah. And I acknowledge, and it's probably not really a lot of way to enforce that, but I still like it.
Kind of puts the idea in people's
Puts
heads.
the idea in people's heads, but
yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm too worried about the 50% painted metal thing.
Yeah, I'd be okay changing it personally if it looks, I think we're all worried about eyesores. But if, like he showed a building of a really nice metal building that, but I don't know how you codify that, or codify, is that the right, how you say
To
it?
not have an eyesore.
But how do you put that in code, yeah, to,
Maybe we could ban just galvanized steel.
yeah, that,
Alka, is the point that metal, it wears differently, so like, will it be rusting, will the paint chip more so than other? Because if that's the case, then you could speak to,
Hmm.
you know, whether it's how it's painted, or whether it's
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because a lot of homes are sided with aluminum siding that's painted.
Right.
So I don't know how that fits into this conversation, but.
I guess part of my struggle is I think if you get, in South Ogden, in a residential area, if you get a two-car garage that's strictly one of those corrugated metal, even if it's painted metal, as your whole garage, yeah, I don't think that's particularly attractive. So, in some ways, I would like to regulate that, but it's the whole problem of, well, that's my taste, and somebody's taste might be different. So I didn't know if there's a way to say, you know, in this case that came to us, where you couldn't really tell that it was metal and it was board and batten,
Mhm.
allow it, but you don't allow corrugated metal, or,
Right.
I don't know, I don't,
Right, and I know people or residents can apply for an exception. I guess for me, that takes time. And I don't know if they're in time crunch to get the specific, building up. And I didn't want to waste any of their time when we could just easily just take out that provision moving forward. Obviously, I have a different opinion, and I'm more open about accessory structures. I think having different colors and different shapes brings character to a community, but I understand people's argument of it being maybe unsightly.
I was kind of thinking the same thing. I have my own concerns about looking at somebody's stuff. But in the big picture is that we need to decide, as long as it's functional to them and it's not broken and doors aren't, windows aren't busted out, and it doesn't look like it's gonna catch fire,
Sure.
why are we?
Well, they're priced like US metal roofs have come a long way. And it's the same as metal siding. We've got metal siding now that's very attractive. It's probably as durable, some of the factory painted, coated metal is probably as durable or more durable than a lot of other building materials that people
Mhm.
use for siding.
It doesn't sound like this guy that's
Yeah.
doing this is going, doesn't sound cheap.
No.
It's not like he's trying to cut corners.
No, and for his specific case, the builders that he was going with reached out to me first, wanted to get clarification, but he really wanted this specific structure. And so, and I don't know if it's because it was cheaper or he just liked their work or thought it was gonna last longer, whatever it may be. And so to me, it's like, well, now because of our code, we're limiting, he's not gonna be able to get what he wants.
I think we just take out the 50% requirement.
I agree.
So is this where you want a motion for something,
Doesn't
or
need to
just?
be a motion, but just direction, because I could just leave it alone, right, and not do any work on it. And I guess ultimately, it's gonna be up to city council, see if they even want to change it, right? But, I guess just to remove the 50% and maybe put different wording in there. And we can leave that it has to be similar to the exterior wall color of the main residence. So we're okay with moving forward with making some sort of change.
I think I'm hearing yes.
Okay.
Same problem with it being 100% if it's the right,
Sure.
if it's the right metal solid.
Well, I think the building inspector did have to look at it.
Mhm. If it's over 200 square feet, yeah. Okay.
I think one of the pluses is that it's low maintenance and the longevity is better, which would be a plus for the neighbors because, you put another type of siding on there and they don't maintain it, worse than the metal probably will after,
Sure.
10, 15, 20 years.
Okay.
All right, moving on to special items. Open and public meeting training questions.
So you all watched some of the training. If you have any specific questions between Alika, myself, and Summer, We will try to answer any questions you might have. If you don't have any, that's all okay too.
Just open it up to questions.
Those are the kind of questions we like.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, you can also email me or Lisa if you don't want to, if you come up with a question later on or you don't want to state it right now. I think all of you have signed the affidavit. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we have approval of minutes of the previous meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of the December 12th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting.
Okay, I have a motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Oh, are there any nays? But I heard all of them say aye. I did. All right. Now we'll move to staff reports. City council updates.
Yeah, I think for the most part, we're caught up with everything that was sent from Planning Commission. But this was something that was just brought up with City Council. It may or may not come back to Planning Commission. During the last City Council meeting, we talked about landscape requirements and water-wise. And it sounds like it's going to be part of a work session, whether it be the next one or the one after that. And potentially, if they want to change some sort of wording on requiring maybe some percentage of like greenery as part of like a front lawn, that may come before you, Planning Commission. Right now, our landscape ordinance was structured so that our residents could qualify for like the strip, which actually turned into, I don't know what the exact name is, but basically flipping their whole front yard to be more water-wise with Weaver Basin. So, yeah, potentially that may be coming back to you.
Yeah, I was listening to the city council where they were talking about that, and it seems there's some pretty broad opinions
Yeah,
on that one, so.
yeah, it may be nothing, but just a heads up that it may come back to Planning Commission. And then next one, as far as a joint session, I'm hoping to have something for the second meeting in February. I'll have to double check that and I'll send out an email letting you guys know. But that's to talk about catalytic projects and possibly active transportation. And that would, yeah, and that would take place for City Council's work session. But I will,
That's the 18th of February.
yeah, the 18th of February, but I will send out an email with the details on that. With where to find these catalytic projects and the active transportation. I'm not sure how much we can accomplish in 1 hour. The main focus will be those catalytic projects, and if we need to move active transportation to another time, then we will. But yeah, that's it for now.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to other business. And I know we just had training, but any more findings on field trips or anything like that?
Yeah, so I reached out to Mill Creek, and they're open to having us go. I was thinking sometime in the summer, so it would be easier to, walk around. And they would be happy to kind of go through the process of, this is how we came up with this, or these are the barriers that we ran into. We can have it instead of a meeting, or we can plan out a different time for us to go. And we can either all meet there, or we can try to find a vehicle for us all to squeeze in here and travel there.
We could
I'm
figure
still
those details
arranging
out,
that.
yeah.
Rent a
Yeah.
party bus.
Yeah, we have a party bus, yeah.
All right, any other business from the other commissioners? Any?
Not for me.
Okay. public comment. Is there anyone online? All right, we have our one guest. Are you gonna? All right, did I need to make a motion to enter into a public comment, or?
You only have to do that for public hearings,
Okay,
not for public comment.
all right, I guess with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right,